All right, everybody, no flashy intro. We're just going to say this. Today, we're going to talk about fear stacking and where that came from and why I started doing it. So buckle up and get ready. All right, everybody. So back for another Monday, another episode. And we're going to, I'll say, it seems like it's time to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about the fear discussion. So you'll see fear actually has a pretty big place, especially in Burn the Script. Obviously, this seems like, I'll say, after the 3 episodes with Dr. Drew Smith, it seemed appropriate to kind of get into how did things start with the fear thing, and then how did it get to where it is today. I think fear is from a leadership perspective, fear is one of the primary emotional drivers that impede people's ability to lead effectively. So what do I mean by that? So in essence, like I released an episode about if you can't fire your mom, you can't lead. So obviously with that is if they've genuinely completed a fireable or releasable offense, it doesn't matter whether they're family or not. You have to be able to act. A lot of the times our emotions, especially fear, gets in the way. So a lot of the time, fear is driven by archetypal issues. I'm sure we're going to have more conversations with Dr. Smith. But for today, I kind of wanted to get into, I know some folks have heard the official story of like how did the whole fear stacking thing start with me and where did it come from? So we'll chat about it a little bit here. We'll see how many episodes this turns into because frankly, it's not a quick story, but I think it's a story that's important. It also has shaped my view on leadership, and I also think it can shape a lot of other people's views, especially when you understand, 1, the power of fear, and 2, the power of confronting it. Like the ability to address and go at your fears is scary at first, but it's liberating. It unlocks things that I think many people struggle with. So with that, let's kind of get started. So I'll say we'll do some episodes here as far as I'll show you some of the footage from some of the fear stacking events that I concocted and moved myself into. But it ultimately, fear stacking started. It's actually very strongly connected to a few different things. But first up, I'll say we won't get into all the super fine details, but in essence, so when I was finishing my doctorate, work I had quite a few issues going at work. It was pretty oppressive. Trying to finish a doctorate, I'm trying to, actually finish a dissertation in that phase, and then took over as interim chair of a department, and then was trying to navigate all of that. And then, of course, I'll say, unfortunately, at that time, now this is years ago, but at that time, my wife Leslie was diagnosed with breast cancer. So she's fine now. I'll say she's fought that off, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But and I want to put it in context because I think the events that I witnessed as well as the post events really changed my view on how you can reshape and rewire your personality. So first up, I think before we get into the natural event, the short version here is that I would stress that I don't think most people realize the power of comfort and that our nervous system has been wired for comfort. Like in essence, if you look back to the caveman days, I mean, instability and chaos could lead to death. So over the centuries and over multiple generations, our nervous systems within our species have been optimized to store painful things. It has housed primal fears, and anytime something is reminiscent of that, it will resurface and it will drive us to avoid it. So a lot of the times people can't make change. Like, if you've ever noticed, like the whole issue with New Year's resolutions, with doing exercise and all these things, really comes down to the fact that you have to get over the resistance cycle that your nervous system presents. This is why this is an ongoing issue. Like, you need 21 days. 21 days of consistently doing something in order to be effectively changing a habit, and then your body and nervous system will optimize, and it will become comfortable, because now you've done it long enough. Your system kind of relents and then goes, okay, we got to optimize for this. So then it optimizes, right? So now with that, so things like fear of the unknown, primal fears, etc., will fundamentally kick in. I don't know what's going on, and then we will move towards comfort. That's typically what happens. So that is why, like, a lot of the times people go, well, you know, if everybody knows what's wrong in an organization from a leadership perspective, why don't they just change it? Because it's easier and it's more comfortable to ignore it, because your nervous system will drive that. Okay, it just will. So that is, I'll say, one of the main reasons, in my opinion, that people have a hard time leading effectively, especially in difficult situations. Now, I know you're kind of like, hey, Skippers, we're going to talk about your fear stacking and your fear thing. So now, with that said, remember, the nervous system, in essence, you have to reset the nervous system. That's what it comes down to. To me, fear stacking does that. But let's talk about what made me recognize that. So, as I mentioned, the situation with work, I was doing a dissertation, which was a heavy load, just those two alone. And then Leslie was diagnosed with breast cancer, and, you know, things kind of blew up, meaning it really put me in a position, and I want to, you know, give her a big nod, because to face your primal fear, like your biggest fear that you are worried about in your life, and then you have to face it. You know, that type of diagnosis, you know, it has ran in her family, so she was concerned at some point in her life she'd have to deal with it. Of course, it came up, and then at that point, you really don't have a choice. Like, you have to deal with it, or if you don't deal with it, it will deal with you. It's that simple. So it really was like, hey, we don't have a choice here. It's gonna change our lives, and we have to do things about it. Okay. Now, I'll be honest, like, for me, with the massively oppressive workload I had, trying to do a dissertation, and then going, okay, which to me was, I was like, hey, my spouse is more important than my job and my dissertation. That was my view. And so I very much, and honestly, on a very open level, I sat back and went, I don't know if I can do this with these three different things being stacked on top of each other. I don't know if I can do this. This is oppressive. Most people would not be able to do this. And I don't even know if I can. That's what was going through my head. So there was a piece of me that was saying, I don't know, I don't think you can do this. So I actually, in my mind, I was doing it out of concern and support, but I actually had a conversation with Leslie and said, listen, I can pause the dissertation, and then we can get you taken care of, and then I can come back to it. And then, without hesitation, she basically said, no, just get it done. And it was interesting, because at that point, I basically, the whole issue of self-confidence and can I get through this, it just became well, you don't have a choice, so just shut up and do it. So I did. So that changed some things for me personally. It was like, and then having worked through it, it made me go, you are capable of more than you probably think that you are. And a lot of the heavy leadership people and speakers talk about this. Like, when we think we've hit our capacity, we really haven't. We just think we have. Now, I do want to lean in specifically. Okay, so there's a very specific thing. So we had originally intended that at the completion of her treatment cycle, and I was also, you know, speccing to or planning to be defending and completing my doctorate, that we would take a trip, we'd take a family trip, and then we would celebrate there. So we had a special dinner planned. It was, you know, it was a very big deal. And it was a trip to Disney World. That's been how we've celebrated. We typically go to theme parks and things like that. That's kind of our shtick. And if things didn't work out, I'll say I had finished my dissertation, but the defense got scheduled later than expected, mostly due to the availability of the committee members, which was fine. But we did still go, because we were still celebrating Leslie's successful completion of her treatment cycle. And I'm not going to get into the details of, her trials and tribulations through it. I will say this, like, if you, like, any day that you think you're having a really bad day or that you don't know if you're going to be able to get through, one of the things I would tell you is just, shut up and go sit in a cancer treatment center and watch the people that come in. The minute you think you have serious problems, if you're not battling to live, you really don't have problems, is really what it comes down to. So I kind of saw that, and I saw the fear, and I saw the impact of the events, and people clearly comprehending their impact to their mortality, and that they would potentially, maybe or maybe not get through the fight. But so that was sobering in a certain level. So I was around this, and I saw it, kind of, reflected on it quite a bit. And then after her successful completion, we're on our vacation. And so we have gone to Disney World like many times, many times. And over the years, when we've gone to Hollywood Studios, there is, for those who attend there, you'll know the ride, there is the Tower of Terror. And the Tower of Terror is, it's a drop ride. It's randomized. It's changed over the years. So you never quite know how many drops you're going to get. It's pretty disorientating if you don't like drops. And over the years, I was fine with it. I enjoyed it. I'll say it was something that Leslie over time just didn't like to do. She was not comfortable on the ride. I think it was poking at her, I'll say it was poking at her on a level that didn't make her comfortable. And then she would typically say, as we would walk up to the entryway, she would, it would be, okay, I'll see you after I'm off the ride. And then she would go wait by the exit, and then I would ride. And I would get off, and then we would connect again and then go on and do other things in the rest of the park. So now let's fast forward to what I'm talking about with, it's the December, I think it was 2018, and we are there to celebrate her success in completing her treatment cycles and getting through effectively. And we go on that ride. So this is really, and I'm going to tell you, like, this is the beginning of what made me realize, like, the power of fear and what facing your fears does to you. So as we're walking up to the ride, I did not assume that anything would be different. So, because it had been that way for so many years. So I just simply said, well, I'll see you when I get off the ride. And then I just kept marching, because normally we'd split by the entry, and then I would start marching up, and then she would head down, and we'd, like I said, connect later. And so I'm marching up, I'm going up through the zigzag turnstiles and all this stuff. And then as you go into that ride, there's a big lobby area that looks like an old Hollywood style hotel. That's part of it. It's the Tower of Terror kind of thing. It's a Hollywood Tower Hotel is the ride name of it within it. So I go to get in line, and as I'm standing there, I realize that somebody's standing really close to me. And I was like, what? At first I was like, well, I don't really like strangers like getting in my personal space. So I was kind of like, what the? And I turn and I look, and it's Leslie. And I was like, that's odd. She doesn't like this ride. She doesn't like it. It kind of pokes at her. And so, I'll say, being potentially a wise husband, I would say, I just kind of decided, well, I'm not going to say anything. So she's chosen to ride it, so whatever, that's fine. Maybe when it's done, maybe some convo. So we ride it, we go through it, we get off. We are walking out of the ride, and I said, hey, you rode it. And then she paused, and she said, yeah, it's not so scary anymore. And in that moment, I realized that, fear has a very specific power over us. And it's primal, is what I would say. It's exceptionally primal. And that's why I bring this up, is that moment, that litmus right there, was when I realized intrinsically that if something that terrifies you and is a primal fear, by facing it, if it significantly skews and alters your ability to process other fears that normally you wouldn't be able to process, what would that do? How could you leverage that? And so that was really an observation that it was like, wow, if that did that for her, what else would happen if you confront your fears? is really kind of what it came down. Now, I've had some different fear stuff over the years, but that in particular, watching that third person is what I would say. The third person observation of that really brought power with it. And so for that, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I'll say, well, basically we'll kind of fast forward. And like I said, we're probably going to chop this up a little bit because it's going to be a pretty long discussion. But so we'll fast forward to, I think it was summer of 2023. It was August of 2023. I had been invited to go to Gatlinburg to speak on cybersecurity. It's not uncommon for me to do that. That's my research area. That's my doctoral degrees, a doctorate of science in cybersecurity. So, we're getting ready for the trip. And then with that trip, I had said to Leslie, I was like, hey, I'm going to go down. I'm going to speak. Do you want to go down? I think it was like on Monday or Tuesday. And I said, do you want to go down early? And then we can kind of spend some time. It's near, Dollywood in Pigeon Forge down in Tennessee. And so she said, yeah, sure. So we went. But in planning, she was looking at things to do in Gatlinburg. So it really, obviously, Dollywood was a lot of what we're going to do in Pigeon Forge. But then as we looked at Gatlinburg, she spotted the Gatlinburg SkyBridge, the Sky Park or SkyBridge there. And she said to me, hey, I know you have a fear of heights. I'd like to walk the SkyBridge. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I'll just do it on my own. And I'll say, I've shared this story with others that kind of snicker when I say this, but so if you have a spouse, I'll say, especially gentlemen, and I think you'll probably understand where I'm coming from when I explain this. So like I just explained to you a couple minutes ago, like, hey, I have a wife who faced her biggest fear, which was, breast cancer, and got through that, and then was fundamentally changed on some levels with it. And then, here she is asking me like, hey, do you want to walk the SkyBridge? If you don't want to do it, that's fine. And I was kind of like, I'm not going to sit here and tell my wife who's done who's battled her biggest fear and battled her breast cancer battle, and tell her, yeah, I don't have the cojones to walk across the bridge and face my fear of heights. I really just wasn't in a position where I was going to be happy with myself as a person if I backed out. And so, you can kind of say, hey, whatever, you can have you can judge that however you want. That's up to you. So I said, no, that's fine. I'll go. And she's like, well, you got to ride a ski lift up. You're kind of up in the air. And I'm like, yeah, I've been on ski lifts before. I've skied. It's not a big deal. And I said, I'll deal with it. Whatever. That's fine. So we got there. I'll say, hopefully we'll be able to show some pictures here. And the day came for Gatlinburg's SkyBridge. We got up. We went to the site. And, I wasn't like, I could see it. Like I said, I hopefully I'll have some pictures here to show in the background. We got on, brought our tickets. We got on the ski lift. We went up, and then it was interesting. I think we were like the third or fifth couple up that morning. And then as you're going up, the Sky Park takes your picture on the actual on the ski lift as you go up. So a lot of people went into the gift shop to go get their pictures. And I was like, no, before I do anything, I just want to get this over with. I just want to walk this bridge and be done with it. And then as I went to do that, we walked up on the SkyBridge, and like I said, so take a look at the pictures. And as I approached it and I looked, I realized I had kind of looked at some info on it, but I didn't look at it deeply because I was like, it's probably, it shouldn't be that bad. And then as I walked up to it, it's over a football field long. It's like 1.5 football fields or something. I'll get the info. And as I walked up to it and I looked at it and I went, damn, this is not what I expected it to be. And so we're standing there, and I just paused, and I'm looking at it, and you're kind of waffling with your fear, is what I would say. So, and it started to kick in. Anybody who has a fear of heights, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So as I'm standing there, I'm looking down. I'm literally looking, through this little gate that you walk through, and I'm looking down at the suspension bridge. And of course it's going to move, and it's got a 30-foot glass span in the center and all this stuff. I knew that, but I didn't know how long it was. And I'm looking at this going, damn. And then I'll say, so as I'm silently, mentally waffling, like, oh my God, Leslie says, what are you doing? And then as I'm looking at it, I said, damn, I did not expect this to be this long. And she said, well, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I'll just walk it. And then I said, no, no, no. And then I said, no, I'll do it. And then I got quiet again, and I'm looking at it, and I said, you know what? I just said, I need to go right now, or I'm going to talk myself out of this, is what's going to happen. And so then I just took off. I just started walking. I walked through the gate. I got onto the bridge. Now, I'll be honest, I put my right hand, I reached over and held on to the side rail. Not like the grip of death, but, you're walking along with your hand on the side rail. As I'm going, of course, this thing's moving of some. It's wire suspension, but it's still, they move, right? And as I'm going and I'm getting towards the center, I'm like, you're kind of battling that, your mind is telling you like, oh my God, this is gonna get you, and all these things. And you're dealing with that primal fear is what I would say. And so as I started to approach, now I was starting to get decent with it. Like, okay, I'm not super happy about it, but I'm kind of okay. I think I can deal with this. And then as I'm approaching the center, I realized, okay, this is a 30-foot glass panel. So like you have to walk on the glass. And obviously it's plate glass, but you have to walk on the glass to span it and get to the other side. And so I was like, in my brain, we all hear that. We've heard the saying, no matter what you do, don't look down. Like, don't look down. It'll freak you out. And that popped up in my head. And so as I'm approaching this, the interesting thing is that's when I realized if my unconscious or subconscious or whatever is fundamentally pushing me to say, don't look down, okay, because you're going to lose your shit. That's when I realized, like, if that's what fear is telling me, I have to do the opposite. And I will say, I was, you may be like, oh, there's no way I could do that. But for whatever reason, now I had done some bouts. I had already dealt with some fears, kind of things like that. But so as I'm doing this, I'm like, no, you gotta look down. Otherwise, you're going to waste this trip. You're going to waste it. There's going to be no value in it. And so as I got to the glass, I didn't stop. I didn't hesitate. I just kept going. And I did. I looked down. I looked down, and I could see all the way down to the bottom of the ravine. And we're up like 400 or 500 feet up in the air. So it's a pretty big drop, right? And so I'm looking down going, yeah, that's a big drop. I'm like, this is not, my fear heights is like, it's tingling, right? It's not happy. And then as I got to the end, so 30 feet, at the end of that 30 feet of glass, something happened. And what I mean by that is as I spanned the glass and I had done what my primal my primal brain told me not to do, I let go of the side rail and it melted away. Okay? Not fully. The bulk of the tension and everything that was in the moment with heights melted away. Okay? So, and I can't tell you, I can't put into words what that turned into other than, holy shnikes, like, look at what just happened. I went, head first into addressing this fear. And this is how much power it lost. Like, it lost significant power with me. Now, as much as I'd like to say that saga is over, it actually wasn't. And much to my, I don't know if I should say dismay, and surprise, there was what would call this like tulip tower that's also in this complex up there. And it's basically an upright tower with a spiral walking case around it, but you have to walk. There's 2 suspension bridges out to it. So I had to go those. Now, they weren't long. They weren't super long. They were maybe 50 feet out. but they were true on, they weren't steel cables. They were true on rope style. So they were much looser and they shook. Like walking on it, you'd bounce a couple, 3 feet as you're walking on this sucker. So she's like, hey, I'd like to do the tulip tower. And at this point, I'm like, hey, I should be, whatever. I just did this. I just did this giantly long bridge that like really rubbed pretty hard on the primal fears. And so I was like, no, that's fine. Let's go out. So we go out. And then as I get through, I'm like, I'm just not like, the instability of getting shook up and down and a bit side to side, like up to 2 to 3 feet, isn't really a great feeling. In general, just stability. But I mean, I wasn't losing my mind. I was like, okay, whatever. Got on the actual platform, and then to go up, the actual spiral staircase hangs out over the drop off. So again, it was like one major push, and then now I got other pushes right after it. So I went up. I thought I was gonna. I'll be honest with you, like. Even then, it started to try to recontrol me, like, hey, you can't walk on this outer. And I was like, you know what? You better do this now, because otherwise what you just did will have no value, even though you just melted a bunch of it away. And then I walked up. To the top. We were up there for a while. We walked back down, crossed the janky, I'll call it the janky rope bridge, and we got back, and then we're walking around a different way because there's kind of this loop around. And as we walked around the loop around, that's when I see the sign that says, the Gatlinburg SkyBridge, the longest pedestrian suspension bridge in North America. So I went, holy cow, like I didn't, shame on me for not looking at all the details before I got there, but I sat back and I went, wow, I didn't know that, but I'm actually kind of glad I didn't know that because I probably would have backed out ahead of time. So, but that really, really changed things significantly. So, and it made me realize, like, okay, if I can have, and I can like distill or remove this much power of my primal fears by confronting it face on, like, so it's a nervous system reset or rewiring is really the way I would describe it. When I went, well, if this happens with one, what happens if I stack multiple fears together and deal with them all at the same time, like supercharge the fear stack? And so that is what led to what is, I would now explain as fear stacking, right? So the ability to face more than one fear at the exact same time. So that sets up I'll say that's the larger basis of fear stacking and how it became. Or how, I don't know if I should say how it became, but how it came to mind for me. And so that is, my personal, so in witnessing what Leslie went through, in witnessing and experiencing my confrontation with the fear of heights, I fundamentally realized that there are ways to address fear and distill and take away its power. So let's now, as we've just sat and talked about this for a while, now what the heck does that mean? Because you're like, hey, Dave, what the heck does all of this have to do with leadership? The short version on this is that if you let your fears drive your decisions, you're going to have obstructions that you can never get past. The only way to deal with them is to go at them head on. That's the only way that I know how to subdue and shut down those fears. So if you're sitting back going, I'm afraid of people's opinions, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, you have to dig in and you actually have to figure out, how do I confront those fears? Now, typically, going through them repeatedly will diminish their power. So that is one thing that I would recommend. But innately, if you have a fear of heights or you have a fear of something else, by facing that fear, it can distill the power of other fears at the same time. Now, I will give you a preview because we're going kind of long here today. The the actual fear stacking took place in Hawaii. And I'll kind of, as we get into I'll set that up before I release the videos. So I'll put together some videos so you can kind of see those events as they occurred, and we'll get them out for you to see. And then hopefully you'll kind of understand like where I'm coming from when, you have to find a way to confront those fears and reset them. If you can't do that, you're never going to get to the level that you want to within leadership. And I will end with a particular phrase that I think is very appropriate for this discussion. And that is this: everything that you want is on the other side of fear. So with that, we'll call it for this week. Hope to see you next week.